Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
I was in a board meeting in Singapore when my phone buzzed with the email from my sister Rachel. Subject: Dad's memorial service, family only. Claire, given your complicated relationship with Dad and the caliber of attendees we're expecting, his business partners, the country club board, several city council members, Mom and I think it's best you don't attend the memorial service. Important people will be there and we can't have any awkwardness or scenes. This isn't personal. It's about respecting Dad's legacy. Rachel. I read it twice. Then I set my phone down and returned to the presentation about our expansion into Southeast Asian markets. Ms. Morrison, my CFO prompted. Your thoughts on the Jakarta property acquisition? Proceed, I said. Full purchase. Cash. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried about my father in 15 years. Not when he told me I was wasting my life at 23. Not when he refused to come to my college graduation because I'd chosen some meaningless liberal arts degree. Not when he'd said at my sister's engagement party that he only had one daughter who made him proud. And I wouldn't cry now. I was born Claire Elizabeth Morrison, the second daughter of Robert Morrison, self-made real estate developer, country club president, and the kind of man who measured success exclusively in square footage and stock portfolios. Rachel was born first. Perfect Rachel with her business degree from Wharton, her corporate lawyer husband, her immaculate house in the right neighborhood, her ability to say exactly what Dad wanted to hear. Then there was my brother Marcus, the golden boy, Dad's protege, groomed from birth to take over Morrison Properties. And then there was me. I studied philosophy and literature. I worked at a nonprofit after college. I dated an artist. I moved into a small apartment in what Dad called the wrong part of town. I wore thrift store clothes to family dinners and talked about things like social impact and community development. Every family dinner was the same script. Claire, when are you going to get serious about your career? Claire, you can't live on idealism. Claire, do you know how embarrassing it is when my colleagues ask what my daughters do and I have to explain that one runs a nonprofit? When I was 28, I started my first company. A small community development consulting firm. I didn't tell my family. I knew what they'd say. By 30, I'd expanded into affordable housing development. By 32, I'd secured my first major municipal contract. By 35, I'd quietly built a portfolio of properties across 8 cities. By 38, I controlled a real estate and investment empire worth $6.2 billion. I never told them. Not because I was hiding it. Because I'd learned that their opinion of me wasn't based on facts. It was based on the story they needed to tell themselves. That their way was the only way and anyone who chose differently was a failure. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. Over the years, the family gatherings got worse. At Rachel's baby shower, Mom introduced me to her friends as our other daughter. She works with poor people. At Marcus's wedding, Dad literally forgot to include me in the family photos until the photographer asked if there was another sibling. At Christmas 3 years ago, Rachel gave everyone beautifully wrapped gifts. When she got to me, she said, I didn't get you anything expensive since I know you prefer simplicity. The gift was a $20 candle from Home Goods. I'd given her kids' savings bonds worth $50,000 each. They assumed I was broke, struggling, living paycheck to paycheck in my little apartment while doing my charity work. In reality, I owned the entire building. And the 3 buildings next to it. I drove a 10-year-old Civic because I didn't care about cars. They thought it was because I couldn't afford better. I wore simple clothes because fashion didn't interest me. They thought it was because I shopped at discount stores. I rarely traveled with them because I was busy running a multinational corporation. They thought it was because I couldn't afford the vacations. Every assumption was wrong. Every dismissal was evidence I cataloged quietly. The last time I spoke to my father was 18 months ago. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting with the mayor of Denver about a $340 million development project, but I stepped out to take the call. Claire, I need to talk to you about something serious. What's wrong, Dad? I'm updating my will. Your mother and I have been discussing it and we want to be fair. Fair. That word in my family always meant something else. Rachel and Marcus will be splitting the Morrison Properties portfolio and the investment accounts. You'll receive a small cash bequest. Enough for a down payment on a proper home maybe. We think that's more appropriate given your lifestyle choices. I was quiet for a long moment. Claire? Are you there? I'm here. We're doing this because we love you. We want you to have something stable. Not to waste it on your charity projects. I understand. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. That was the last time we spoke. He died of a heart attack 6 months later. I was in London closing a deal when I got the call from Rachel. Dad's gone, she said. No greeting. No emotion. Just facts. I'm sorry, I said. The funeral is on Saturday. I'll send details. She hung up. The details never came. Just that email 3 days before the service, uninviting me from my own father's memorial. I sat in my office in the building I owned in downtown Manhattan and made a decision. I called my assistant. Catherine, I need you to make some arrangements. Of course, Ms. Morrison. I'm attending my father's memorial service on Saturday. Contact Forbes. Tell them I'm ready to do the profile piece they've been requesting for the last 2 years. But I want it connected to an announcement. What announcement? The Robert Morrison Memorial Foundation. I'm establishing it with an initial endowment of $6.2 billion. Full details to be released Saturday. Catherine was quiet for a moment. She'd been with me for 8 years. She knew my family situation. Ms. Morrison, are you sure? Completely. Also, I want our legal team to prepare a complete financial disclosure package. Every property I own. Every investment. Every business interest. I want documentation of the full scope of Morrison Holdings. For the family? For my family, I said. They're about to find out who I actually am. The service was held at Riverside Memorial Chapel. The kind of place with marble floors and stained glass and rooms that could hold 300 people. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a black Tom Ford suit that cost more than my sister's monthly mortgage payment. My hair was professionally done. I wore my grandmother's pearls, the ones Dad had given to Mom, who'd given them to Rachel, who'd sold them at an estate sale 5 years ago without knowing I'd bought them back. The receiving line was already formed. Wait, Marcus. Their spouses. Their children lined up like a perfect family portrait. I joined the line. Rachel saw me first. Her face went rigid. Claire. I thought I made it clear. I'm here to pay my respects to my father, I said calmly. Unless you plan to physically remove me from a public memorial service. Mom leaned over. Claire, please. Not today. There are important people here. I understand, I said. I'll sit in the back. I walked into the chapel. Every pew was filled with Dad's business associates, country club friends, city officials. People who knew Robert Morrison, the successful developer. The philanthropist. The pillar of the community. Not one of them knew me. I sat in the last row, next to an elderly woman I didn't recognize. The service was everything Dad would have wanted. Elegant. Impressive. Full of speeches about his accomplishments, his vision, his legacy. Marcus gave the eulogy. He talked about Dad teaching him about business, about integrity, about building something that mattered. He didn't mention me once. Rachel read a poem about fathers and daughters. She didn't mention me either. It was as if I didn't exist. I sat quietly, hands folded, watching the performance of a family I'd never really belonged to. The service ended. People filed into the reception hall. Another expensive room with catered food and an open bar and photographs of Dad displayed on easels. I stood by myself near the window holding a glass of water. Rachel approached with her husband, David. I can't believe you actually came. He was my father. Was he, though? Rachel's voice was cold. You never acted like it. Never came to family events. Never showed interest in the business. Never bothered to build any kind of relationship with him. Rachel. No, Claire. You made your choices. You chose your little nonprofit world over your family. And now you show up here at his funeral after years of basically abandoning us. People were starting to watch. Marcus joined us. What's going on? I'm just explaining to Claire that her presence here is uncomfortable for everyone. I have every right to be here, I said quietly. Right. Marcus laughed. You gave up any rights when you decided Dad's values weren't good enough for you. When you chose poverty and idealism over actually contributing to the family legacy. You don't know anything about what I've contributed. Oh, we know exactly what you've contributed. Nothing. While Rachel and I built careers, while we expanded Morrison Properties, while we made Dad proud, you were off playing savior to people who probably laughed at your trust fund naivety behind your back. I took a breath. Stay calm. Stay controlled. Are you finished? Honestly, Claire, Rachel said, the kindest thing you could do right now is leave. Let the people who actually loved Dad celebrate his life without your performative grief. That's when I saw her. A woman in her 50s, professional, carrying a camera bag and a press credential on a lanyard. She was scanning the room, clearly looking for someone. He caught my eye. Started walking toward our group. Rachel was still talking. And furthermore, when the will is read next week, don't expect any surprises. Dad was very clear about his intentions. Excuse me, the woman interrupted. I'm looking for Claire Morrison? The circle went quiet. I'm Claire Morrison, I said. The woman smiled, relieved. Perfect. I'm Jennifer Walsh from Forbes magazine. We've been trying to reach you all week about the profile and the announcement. Your assistant said you'd be here. Do you have a few minutes for some preliminary questions before we schedule the full interview? Rachel's face went blank. Forbes magazine? Yes, Jennifer said, pulling out a notebook. We're doing a major feature on Ms. Morrison for next month's cover. The Invisible Titan. How Claire Morrison built a $6.2 billion empire while nobody was watching. We're particularly interested in the announcement about the Memorial Foundation you're launching today. The timing is incredibly moving. Memorial Foundation? Marcus's voice was strangled. The Robert Morrison Memorial Foundation, Jennifer continued, reading from her notes. Initial endowment of $6.2 billion. Focused on affordable housing development and community investment in underserved areas. It's one of the largest philanthropic initiatives launched this year. Our readers are going to be fascinated by how you built Morrison Holdings while maintaining such a low profile. Mom had appeared at Rachel's elbow. I'm sorry, did you say $6.2 billion? Yes, ma'am. According to our research, your daughter controls one of the most successful private real estate and investment portfolios in the country. 16,000 residential units across 23 cities. Majority stakes in 3 Fortune 500 companies. A venture capital arm that's backed 47 successful startups. The scope is remarkable, especially given how young she was when she started. Jennifer turned to me. Ms. Morrison, I wanted to ask about your father's influence on your business philosophy. Our preliminary research suggests your approach to community-focused development was actually a direct response to your father's more traditional commercial model. Is that accurate? I opened my mouth to respond. My brother started screaming. That's impossible. She works at a nonprofit. She drives a Civic. She lives in a tiny apartment. Jennifer looked startled. Sir, I assure you our research is thoroughly vetted. Ms. Morrison owns the building she lives in. And the entire block. The car is a personal choice. Many billionaires prefer modest vehicles. Billionaire. Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. Of course. Ms. Morrison, should we find somewhere quieter to talk? I know this is a difficult day. Before I could answer, another commotion at the entrance. A man in an expensive suit strode through the crowd like he owned the place. He probably owned half the city. Claire. Governor Richard Chin. He'd been Dad's friend for 30 years. He walked right past my family and embraced me. I just heard about the foundation. $6.2 billion. Your father would be, well, he'd be speechless. You know about this? Mom's voice was shrill. The governor looked at her with surprise. Of course. Claire and I have worked together on several initiatives over the years. She's revolutionized affordable housing policy in this state. Her testimony before the legislature last year changed everything. He turned back to me. I wanted to speak at the press conference tomorrow. To talk about your father's legacy continuing through your work. Even if you approached it differently than he did. Rachel grabbed my arm. This is a joke. Some kind of sick joke. You're trying to upstage Dad at his own funeral. Rachel, I said quietly, pulling my arm free. I'm not trying to upstage anyone. I'm establishing a foundation in Dad's name because, despite everything, he taught me to build things that last. He just never understood that I was listening. But, the nonprofit. Marcus stammered. Your apartment, you never had money. I had plenty of money. I chose a modest lifestyle because material displays don't interest me. The nonprofit I worked at? I founded it. And funded it. It was my first venture before I scaled into larger developments. Jennifer was taking notes rapidly. This is perfect. The family discovering the truth at the memorial. Our readers are going to love this human element. Wait, David, Rachel's husband, suddenly spoke up. Morrison Holdings. You said she controls Morrison Holdings. That's right, Jennifer confirmed. David pulled out his phone, typing frantically. His face went white. Rachel. Morrison Holdings is the parent company of Vertex Development. So Vertex Development is the largest investor in Morrison Properties. They own 62% of the company. I saw it in the last quarterly report. The silence was deafening. Marcus grabbed David's phone, staring at the screen. That's not possible. We took on that investor 5 years ago to prevent bankruptcy. It was an anonymous investment group. Not anonymous, I said quietly. Private. I bought the controlling interest in Dad's company when it was failing. I've been the primary investor keeping Morrison Properties afloat for 5 years. Mom sat down heavily in the nearest chair. You saved Robert's company? I saved Dad's legacy. The company he built. I couldn't let it fail even if he never knew I was the one protecting it. Jennifer was writing furiously. This is incredible. You secretly saved your father's company while he was alive, and now you're creating a foundation in his name. Ms. Morrison, this is exactly the kind of story our readers need to hear. Rachel was shaking her head over and over. No. This doesn't make sense. You were the failure. The disappointment. Dad said a lot of things, I interrupted. Most of them based on assumptions he never bothered to verify. Another woman approached our group. Older, elegant, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Claire Morrison? She extended her hand. Patricia Ashford. I'm the executor of your father's will. I've been trying to reach you. We can discuss the will next week, Rachel said quickly. As planned. Patricia gave her a look that could freeze fire. Actually, Ms. Reston, that's why I need to speak with your sister. There's been a significant development. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. This was found in your father's safe deposit box, dated 2 weeks before his death. It's a codicil to his will. Handwritten. Legally witnessed. He handed it to me. I opened it with shaking hands. My father's handwriting, unmistakable. Claire, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if Patricia is following my instructions, your brother and sister are learning the truth about you at the same moment. I found out 6 months ago. I hired a private investigator because I couldn't understand why you'd chosen such a difficult life. I thought maybe you were in trouble, needed help you were too proud to ask for. Instead, he came back with a 200-page report on Morrison Holdings. On your empire. On everything you'd built while I was criticizing you for not building anything. I sat in my office and read every page. Every acquisition. Every development project. Every time you'd quietly helped a community I'd dismissed as unprofitable. Every time you'd made money work for something more than just making more money. And I realized I'd been wrong about you for your entire life. I wanted to call you. To apologize. To tell you I was proud. But I was a coward, Claire. I didn't know how to admit I'd been so fundamentally wrong about my own daughter. So I changed my will instead. It's not enough. Nothing could be enough. But it's what I can give you now. Morrison Properties goes to you. All of it. The company you've been secretly funding, the company I almost destroyed through my own arrogance. It's yours. Marcus and Rachel will receive fair financial settlements, but the company belongs to you. Because you're the only one who understood what I was trying to build, even when I didn't understand it myself. I'm sorry I never told you I was proud of you. I'm sorry I wasted so many years being too blind to see who you really were. You were never the disappointment, Claire. I was dead. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the letter. Patricia spoke gently. The codicil has been validated. It supersedes all previous versions of the will. Morrison Properties, including all assets, properties and holdings, transfers to you in full. Your siblings will each receive a settlement of $2 million and specific personal items your father designated. $2 million. Marcus exploded. The company is worth $40 million. $47 million actually, I said quietly, still staring at the letter. Current market valuation. I've been tracking it. You can't do this. Rachel was crying now, mascara running down her face. Dad wouldn't do this. He loved Marcus. He was grooming him to take over. Patricia's voice was ice. Mr. Morrison was quite clear in his instructions. He specifically noted that Ms. Claire Morrison had demonstrated the vision, integrity, and business acumen to continue his legacy. He stated that his son, while talented, lacked the innovative thinking required to adapt Morrison properties to changing markets. He turned to me. He also left you a verbal message with me to be delivered today. What message? He said to tell you, you built everything I taught you to build. You just built it better. I couldn't breathe. The governor put a hand on my shoulder. Claire, are you all right? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Jennifer from Forbes was openly emotional now. Ms. Morrison, would you be willing to include your father's letter in the article? This is the most moving business story I've covered in 20 years. I looked down at the letter again. At my father's handwriting. At words I'd waited my whole life to hear. Yes, I said finally. Yes. People should know that it's never too late to really see someone. Even if you don't get to tell them. The reception descended into chaos after that. Rachel locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing. Marcus tried to contest the will on the spot until Patricia calmly informed him that his father had anticipated that response and had the codicil reviewed by 3 separate law firms. Mom sat in a corner, staring at nothing, looking like her entire understanding of reality had shattered. David, Rachel's husband, approached me quietly. Claire, I'm sorry. For all the years we dismissed you. For every snide comment. For everything. Thank you, I said simply. Can I ask, why didn't you ever tell us? About any of it? I thought about that. Biz, you never asked. You all decided who I was and what my life meant. Telling you the truth wouldn't have changed your minds. It would have just been another thing you couldn't believe. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, your father talked about you more than you knew. Especially in the last few months. He kept saying he needed to fix something. We thought he meant the business. I guess he meant something else. Governor Chin found me an hour later. Claire, the press is gathering outside. They caught wind of the foundation announcement and the will situation. Do you want to make a statement? I looked around the reception hall. At the family that had never understood me. At the business associates who'd never known I existed. At the careful, expensive performance of my father's life. Yes, I said. I'd like to make a statement. They set up microphones in front of the memorial chapel. 50 reporters. Camera crews from every major network. This wasn't just a funeral story anymore. This was a business story. A family story. A redemption story. I stood at the podium looking out at the sea of cameras. My name is Claire Morrison. I'm here to announce the Robert Morrison Memorial Foundation, established with an initial endowment of $6.2 billion, dedicated to affordable housing development and community investment. Hands shot up. Questions shouted. I raised my hand for quiet. My father and I disagreed about many things. He believed success was measured in buildings and profit margins. I believe success is measured in impact and lives changed. But in the end, we were both trying to build things that would outlast us. I pulled out the letter. 2 weeks before he died, my father wrote me this letter. He never sent it. I only received it today. In it, he apologized for not seeing me. For judging me. For being, in his words, too blind to see who I really was. My voice cracked. I steadied it. This foundation is my answer to that letter. It's proof that his values and my values weren't as different as we both thought. He wanted to build. I want to build. We just had different definitions of what mattered. Jennifer from Forbes asked the first question. Ms. Morrison, you secretly saved your father's company while he was alive. Why? Because it was his legacy. Because despite everything, I loved him. Because sometimes loving someone means protecting what they built, even when they don't know you're doing it. Another reporter. Will you be taking over Morrison Properties now? Yes. And I'll be integrating it into Morrison Holdings with a new mission statement. Profitable development that serves communities, not just shareholders. What about your siblings? They'll receive their inheritance as my father specified. What they do with it is their choice. Do you have any message for people who feel unseen by their families? I thought about that question for a long moment. Build anyway. Build what matters to you. Build what changes the world. Don't wait for permission or approval. And know that sometimes the people who dismiss you will eventually see the truth. But by then their opinion won't matter anymore. Because you'll have already built something extraordinary. The questions continued for 30 more minutes. Then the governor ended it, steering me back inside. Rachel was waiting in the hallway. Her eyes were red, her makeup ruined. Claire, don't, I said gently. Not today. Today we bury Dad. Everything else can wait. But the company will be fine. I've been running it from the shadows for 5 years. Nothing changes operationally. Everything changes, she whispered. Everything we thought we knew. You thought you knew, I corrected. I've always known exactly who I was. You just never asked. I walked past her, out to the car waiting for me. My phone was exploding with messages. Board members. Business partners. Interview requests. Forbes wanted to move the cover story up. The Wall Street Journal wanted an exclusive on the foundation. I silenced it all. Instead, I pulled up a photo on my phone. Me and Dad from when I was 7 years old. Before the disappointment. Before the judgment. When I was just his daughter and he was just my father. I hope you can see this, Dad, I whispered. I hope you know I heard what you were trying to say. The Robert Morrison Memorial Foundation broke ground on its first development project. A mixed-income housing community in the neighborhood where I'd lived in my tiny apartment. The guest of honor was my mother. She'd changed in the months since Dad's death. Quieter. More thoughtful. She'd come to my office 3 times to ask questions about the foundation. To understand what I was building. At the groundbreaking she gave a speech. My husband spent his life building impressive things. Buildings that dominated skylines. Developments that made money. He was successful by every traditional measure. He paused, looking at me. My daughter spent her life building important things. Communities that thrive. Opportunities that change lives. She was successful by measures we never thought to consider. Her voice cracked. Robert saw that at the end. He understood that Claire hadn't rejected his values, she'd evolved them. And this foundation is proof that their legacies can coexist. After the ceremony, Rachel approached me. The settlement Dad left me. I've been thinking. Yes. I'd like to invest it in the foundation. Not as a donation. As a true investment. I want to learn what you're doing. How you're doing it. She took a breath. I want to learn who you actually are. Marcus stood beside her. I've been offered a position at Morrison Holdings. Head of Traditional Commercial Development. Reporting to you. He looked uncomfortable. I'd like to accept it. If you'll have me. I looked at my siblings. At the people who'd spent decades dismissing me, now asking to be part of what I'd built. It won't be easy, I said. My standards are high. My mission is non-negotiable. I won't compromise community impact for profit margins. We know, Rachel said. That's why we're asking. We want to learn from you. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Forbes ran the cover story 3 months after the funeral. The headline, The Invisible Titan, How Claire Morrison Built a $6.2 billion empire while her family called her a failure. The article included my father's letter. His handwritten apology. His recognition too late of who I'd always been. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages from people who'd felt unseen. Who'd been dismissed by families who didn't understand them. Who'd built extraordinary things while the people who should have celebrated them looked away. I framed one message and hung it in my office. Thank you for showing us that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest gift. It means you get to build in peace without the weight of other people's expectations. And when they finally see what you've created, it's too magnificent to dismiss. My father never got to see the empire I built. But in his final act he saw me. And in the end that was the inheritance that mattered most. Not the company. Not the money. Not the vindication. Just those words in his handwriting. You were never the disappointment, Claire. I was. I keep the letter in my desk drawer. Sometimes when a deal is particularly difficult or a project seems impossible, I take it out and read it. Not for forgiveness. I gave him that the day I established the foundation in his name. I read it to remember that the people who dismiss you are often fighting their own blindness. And that the greatest success isn't proving them wrong. It's building something so meaningful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. I built an empire while they called me a failure. And when they finally saw the truth, I didn't say, "I told you so." I said, "Now watch what I build next."